Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. We're just going to give a few minutes for people to join before we get started. Welcome. Okay, perfect. I see that there's a good number that's filtering in. Hopefully some of the rest that were expected to join know some of the ground rules around Zoom. But that is what I'm going to start with. So welcome everybody. I'm Kelsey Pearlman. I'm a forest and climate campaigner at Fern. Uh, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Fern, our work is increasing understanding and access to European policymaking for policies and practices in Europe and abroad that focus on forest and forest people's rights. And today we're going to be talking about European forest policy, subsidies and finance. So starting with the house rules, oh, sorry, you can go back. The webinar is going to be recorded today for those people that cannot attend, or if you loved the webinar so much you want to go back and watch it again, always a possibility. Please note that at the bottom of the screen, you have a Q&A function. So that is the way that you will be able to submit your questions to the panelists. We will have a session after 2 blocks of presentations where you can first ask clarifying questions, and then we will open up for a larger conversation after the last presentation that we have. There will be 2 poll questions that happen at the end of the presentations. If you have not participated in polls on Zoom, then you may not have the icon for polls and quizzes available. So what you will need to do is click on More, where you see 3 dots at the bottom of your screen, and you should see access to polls and quizzes. So we will flag when that session starts, but familiarize yourself with the controls at the bottom of the screen. Next slide, please. So we have a very interesting panel today. We have Metodi Sotirov, who is a senior researcher and assistant professor at the chair of forest and environmental policy at the University of Freiburg. He is also the author of the study that we will be diving into today. Then we have Stefan Kreft he's a researcher at the Naturwald Akademie in Germany, and he will be speaking to a specific subsidy scheme in Germany. And then we have Crespin, who is a coordinator of international projects at Forêt Nature. So this is also a program that is referenced inside of the study, and I am your moderator. I have already introduced myself. So before we go into some of the presentations, I just wanted to give some background on why did we commission this report. There are 3 main reasons why we commissioned the report. The first being that overview of financial flows is not a very obvious thing to do, whether that's international climate finance for preventing deforestation and degradation, or whether it's in the EU 27 and you're trying to get a handle of the various national programs, EU subsidies, indirect incentives that might exist through certain policy schemes. It's not an obvious question to answer. And so we wanted to sort of break open that nut so that we could understand a little bit better what are the types of schemes that are out there. This is not meant to be a comprehensive analysis. Obviously, the research community has a lot to do to flesh out exactly what exists in terms of finance across the European Union. However, we do think that this is a valuable contribution to get a handle on the amounts of finance that exist and the quality of the various programs that are there. So this was sort of the internal reason why we first wanted to commission this report. We are also in a context of very competitive budget discussions right now, especially in the realm of climate and environmental finance, which obviously also touches on forests. And so there is a need to understand what financial flows are already being distributed and could potentially be used as best practice, or could give us a clue of where certain finances need to be reoriented to be more efficiently used, especially in a context of potentially not having additional funding in certain spaces. And the last reason, we are an organization that likes to point out some of the problems while also coming to the table with solutions of what types of finance does work for climate and biodiversity outcomes in forests. And we wanted to know what works already, investigate some of the programs. And we have speakers today who can speak to programs that are continuously improving over time, or programs that have already shown themselves to have quite cost-effective and environmentally superb outcomes so far. So that's the goal of this conversation today, is to dive into understanding a bit more the finance flows, and then understanding some specific case studies and recommendations about what we can do in the current context we find ourselves in. So that is my short presentation. As I mentioned, we will have a first presentation by Metodi, which will last around 20 minutes. So I will shortly turn the floor over to him. This will be followed by clarifying questions for 5 minutes. And then we will turn over to Stefan and Anne. And after their presentations, we'll have 5 minutes for clarification before we open up more broadly. So welcome. Please ask all the burning questions that you have on your mind. I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. And with that, I hand the floor over to Metodi.
Yes, thank you so much, Kelsey, for this very kind introduction. Good morning to all fellow colleagues, panelists, to all online participants. It's really my pleasure and honor to be today with you. Yes, as Kelsey introduced that, I'm happy to present to you with a kind of a summary of the main results from a scientific study that I had the pleasure to carry out. We jointly entitled that as follows: Funding Resilient Forests, Rethinking EU and State Subsidies. Next, please. Next. Thank you. The study sets out the important role of public funding as a policy instrument that can and should probably incentivize sustainable forest management. Especially public funding geared towards biodiversity, climate, and recreation, all so to say non-marketable goods, is especially justified as economic incentive. Against the background that biodiversity, climate, and some other non-commodity goods and services basically don't have a market price, or it's hard really to find a market price or a market for them. So basically, it's justified for the state to intervene into the free market economy and offer public funding and incentives to provide payments and financial incentives to the forest owners, for the forest managers, and the consumers for all these non-marketable goods. In addition to that, on the global level, the International Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the IPBES, recommends the reform of environmentally harmful subsidies as a key lever towards achieving transformative change more broadly in different domains of the economy, but also specifically also in the forest sector. Next, please. So seen from the European context, one should probably think and remind of the most important objectives that were set for the forest. So the most important biodiversity and climate-related forest objectives summarized on these slides. Basically, we want to protect 30% of EU land by 2030, including 10% strict protection, including primary and alveolar forests. There is a need to improve conservation and restoration in Natura 2000 forest sites. There is a recommendation to promote close to nature forestry, work with biodiversity-friendly afforestation and reforestation techniques to restore already degraded forest ecosystems and forest-related water bodies. And there is a legally binding objective to achieve net forest sink of minus 310 megatons CO2 a year by 2030 from the land use sector and the forestry sector, the sector. So, and last but not least, there is a need to reconcile forestry with biodiversity and jobs. Right, next one. Thank you. These partly non-legally binding, partly legally binding objectives for forest on the EU level, more or less well supported in academic and practical literature. So what you see on this slide is kind of a summary of the scientific and professional knowledge about what environmentally friendly forestry practices are. So it's very much about conservation of primary alveolar forests, conservation management of 32,000 sites and other protected areas. It's very much about close to nature forestry, including uneven age forests, mixed species, continuous cover forestry, natural regeneration, avoidance of clear cuts, avoidance of monoculture plantations, avoidance, if not reduction, of intensive forest biomass use for energy and material, recommendation to retain as much as possible deadwoods and habitat patches and work with natural regeneration. So the expectation is that all of these practices will support biodiversity restoration and conservation. And in addition to that, they will also help increase the carbon sinks in standing forests. Next one. On the opposite side, scientific knowledge and also practical knowledge suggests that basically intensive rotational forestry models, like based on clear cutting, on monocultures, on salvage logging, which doesn't really leave enough deadwood after calamities, removal of whole trees, stumps, roots for biomass, for energy, planting with single species, non-adapted and alien tree species would all actually be understood as environmentally harmful forestry practices. And there is evidence and also assumption that this will all lead to biodiversity loss, reduced resilience, and weaker carbon sink. Next one. So out of this context, or within this context, my interest as a scientist was to fill quite some existing gaps in our knowledge, to provide a kind of a summary assessment of the most important public funding schemes, both on the EU and the national level, that provides funds for forestry, and assess them along five important evaluation criteria. So including effectiveness, conditionality, additionality, durability, and external conditions like budgets and more or less long and short-term institutional settings. The study has focused in terms of case studies, on a range of member states that more or less represent the diversity of national socioeconomic and ecological context in Europe, including case studies from Belgium, Czech Republic, France, Finland, Germany, and Sweden. This is all about the national funding schemes. In addition to that, I looked at the most important public subsidy schemes at the EU level, including the Common Agricultural Policy, Rural Development Funds, national subsidies under the EU Renewable Energy Directive. And this more or less comprise the main units of analysis. The main sources of information include official websites, publicly available documents, assessment reports, studies, statistics, and many different additional aspects such as expert opinions and short communications. Those public schemes that were identified that were then assessed and classified in terms of harmful, mixed, or friendly, environmentally friendly impact clusters in line with the academic and professional state-of-the-art knowledge, something that I presented before. There are also definitions for the key terms: effectiveness, conditionality, additionality, durability, and budgets. And all of that can be found in the study itself. To the right, you see the link to the study. It's freely available, so please go there for the details. For the purpose of today's presentation, I refrained of using the sources and the citations, just really to have our discussion focus on the main content. Otherwise, the study comes with a very lengthy, hopefully very relevant sources of information. Next one. So I'm jumping now on the key results. So we'll start with the first cluster of what we termed as environmentally friendly subsidies. We estimated that based on those national case studies that I identified, which includes national public subsidies and funding schemes in Belgium, for example, Forêt Nature, in France, Civ Act, in Finland, the Metso program, and also in Germany, the Climate Adapted Forest Management, now Plus. I'm very happy that Anne and Stefan are going to give you further details in terms of some of them. So these are all examples of environmentally friendly subsidies, and taken together, one could kind of see that at the national level, there is some newly emerging or well-established programs that support much of what the scientific and the professional knowledge expects from public subsidies to do, namely to promote forest biodiversity and forest resilience. And we estimated that environmentally friendly subsidies in Europe, mostly to be found on the national level, provide something like around and even more of €500 million euros a year. Those schemes are classified as environmental friendly subsidies because they show, as they are designed, but also in terms of their implementation, a high effectiveness to meet the EU and also the national forest-related biodiversity and climate resilience goals. They come also with important environmental conditionality principles. They also request additionality in terms of going beyond the established minimum standards and practices in the different countries. They are also subsidies that offer payments for biodiversity and climate resilience geared towards the long-term commitments, ranging between 10 to 20 years. This is their so-called internal design. However, the funding schemes themselves are more or less situated in a broader political institutional context, where their funding is, in comparative terms, is quite limited compared to all other existing schemes, as we will show, display rather harmful to mixed impacts, so that those environmentally friendly subsidies can't really, at least at the moment, produce the big transformative change because of still not being the most well-established ones. And in addition to that, many of these schemes struggle also with the funding flows, with the long-term security of the funds. Next one, please. This is just an overview from the study report, where all schemes compared with each other and the main assessment grades are presented. In the report, there is way more detailed information that will help you understand, the reader, why those schemes scored high, respectively low on those 5 key assessment criteria. I don't have time really to go through all of that, but happy to answer your questions. Next one, please. Now I turn to the probably most interesting question in terms of environmentally harmful subsidies. These are mainly national subsidies that are provided in the framework of the EU Renewable Energy Directive for mostly intensive forestry biomass use, which according to the Renewable Energy Directive, is recognized as carbon neutral, et cetera, activity. Another important source of environmental harm subsidies are national schemes and the state aid rules. There are some examples from France, from Finland, and Czech Republic. The reference here to the cap is formal mistake. This comes next under the mixed impact schemes. Sorry about that. And we estimated that on an annual basis, altogether, the national subsidies for renewable biomass, for more or less bioenergy from forests, accounts or has the biggest share among the environmental harm subsidy, about 4.8 billion euros a year, are spent by many member states on incentivizing more or less woods-based bioenergy. Right. The remaining 1 billion euros come from either national programs or some fractions of EU programs that incentivize more or less business as usual practices like clear cutting, monoculture, plantations, deadwoods removal, and most of that, even if this is officially presented in the name of preparing forests for the climate change, coping with climate change related forest disturbances. In the way how these national schemes are implemented or designed, there are many details, and the devil is always in the detail, and they are designed in a way that actually in practice, those national schemes and national subsidy programs rather work against forest biodiversity and climate resilience. So that's why they are assessed to have low effectiveness in terms of achieving the forest-related biodiversity and climate resilience goals. There are little conditionality and additionality principles that come with them, or if there are any, they're quite open and free to interpretation. What probably these environmental harm subsidies can be distinguished from the others, from the environmentally friendly ones, is rather the very political stable context and the long-term budgets and the big shares, big shares of budgets that are really provided for those environmentally harmful subsidies in comparison to the environmental friendly ones. Next one, please. Right. So this is the overview of the case studies that we covered in our study. So I don't have time really to go to all individual schemes. Again, in the report, they are rich descriptions and assessment and analysis that can help understand how and why those schemes really scored rather low on the policy effectiveness and conditionality principles, but low to medium on internal durability, meaning for how long they provide those subsidies, and why they score that high on external durability in budget, meaning why these programs have been there now for more than many years and decades, and probably why they are going to last even longer. Next one. Thank you. Now turn eye to the so-called mixed impact subsidies. So these are both EU and national level public schemes that funds both positive biodiversity and climate resilience positive practices, but also biodiversity and climate resilience harmful practices. It's more often than not that they partly in the way that they are not only designed but implemented, they very often sustain business as usual forestry, or at least business as usual forestry practices pretty much prevail over the biodiversity and climate resilience friendly practices. And implementation pretty much varies in the different countries. So some examples of that are national programs like the Finland's METSCA national scheme, the Sweden's Rural Development Program, the EU funds from the Common Agricultural Policy and Rural Development funds for the last 2 programming periods. So these schemes come with rather medium effectiveness, additionality, and durability. And again, their impacts really very much depend on which measures are really used and how they're really implemented in the countries. Next one, please. All right. So this is again an overview of the mixed impact subsidy schemes. Again, details are to be found in the study. Next one, please. Right. I'm now coming to my last two slides. I'd like to talk about the policy challenges and implications. Next one. Thank you. So in addition to what I just summarized for you and for us, there are additional challenges and paradoxes in this topic of public subsidies for forestry. So very often there are enough funds to incentivize ecosystem management, conservation management, close nature forest management. However, many funds remain either unused or they are subject to pretty complex rules, high administrative costs, or many member states don't really choose to use them, right? Okay, very often it's rather the bigger forest owners that mostly benefit from targeted public funding, and it's rather the small scale forest owners that more or less are excluded or don't have capacity to use those funds. There is also a broader political issue around these challenges and paradoxes. The most important one being that basically there are important policy trade-offs in the objectives between the agricultural and the bioenergy sectors and their policies and the environmental needs and policy objectives. And the forestry sector is somehow chained in between these two. And it's really hard for the forest sector really to compete against the agriculture and bioenergy sectors and to meet the environmental goals. So it's all kind of related to power struggles between the EU and national sectors, and also between the differential sectors. Another very important issue, which is poorly understood and described in science, is indirect subsidies, which come with a kind of a regulatory competition among the member states. So some countries really don't regulate and restrict clear cutting, for example. Others do so. However, they all produce timber commodities and put it on the same common market, right, of the European Union. Okay, that's the 20 minutes. Right, so in a sense, there are some important indirect subsidies that come from regulatory competition among the member states, something that needs to be probably further investigated. Next one, please. All right, the likely implications of this very unfortunate situation at the moment with a bigger share of environmentally harmful subsidies with small share of environmentally friendly is that basically that biodiversity loss is still an issue in Europe. Carbon sequestration reduction is also an issue. It seems like EU climate targets are not to be met. The carbon net sink is smaller by 1/3 today than compared in previous times. Of course, it's not only about public subsidies. There, of course, climate change induces impacts, but the way how the forestry sector reacts to the so-called natural disturbances, partly or to most important part is also incentivized through public subsidies. Next one, please. Okay, now the final slide on conclusion and recommendations. Next one. So I hope I made it clear that subsidies shape a lot of what's happening in terms of forest management in Europe. However, there are different impacts depending on which subsidy schemes are designed and applied. Still, billions of euros are funded and distributed and used that incentivize environmentally harmful practices. On the positive side, we do see some very promising national schemes. However, they remain rather underfunded, very well requested, but we need to see how this can probably be scaled up. Mixed subsidy schemes partly contribute to meeting some environmental policy objectives, but partly they work against that. So it's a bit hard really to say that they rather support environmentally friendly practices. So there is an urgent need to align subsidies with climate and biodiversity goals. And I go now to the next slide. Thank you. Which basically says that it's high need and time really to phase out the farmer subsidies, mainly for biomass, for monocultures and clear cutting. to redirect them towards biodiversity kilometers in forestry. There's a need to strengthen monitoring conditionality principles when subsidies are used. There must be a coherence across the different sectors, agricultural, climate, forestry, energy policies. And there must be a way that small forest owners are allowed to access those funds. And obviously, there is a need for more research, training, capacity building for ecological management forests. Next one, and that's my ones. Yeah, thank you so much for your attention and thank you for bearing with me. Back to you, Kelsey.
Thank you so much, Metodi, for that presentation. There's a lot of rich information. Now we just have a short 5 minutes. I see that there's already some questions in the chat, some of which I think will be very helpful to open up into the larger discussion. But I do see one that does seem much more related just to clarification questions. So from anonymous attendee, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering what was the criteria for choosing those specific member states rather than others? Are those the only countries with schemes? So I think that's mostly directed to you, Metodi.
Yes, thank you. Very, very good question, very relevant question. No, the rationale behind selecting those countries but not others is based on probably three thinkings. First, we wanted to have a kind of a representation of a variety of different socioeconomic, political, and also ecological contexts. So to say, to have the boreal biogeographical regions presented, the continental, also the Eastern European, etc. Second, basically, we wanted to focus on those countries which by their share of forest area have a very big impact on forests in Europe. So it's exactly those countries, including Sweden, Finland, France, Germany, also Poland, for example, that account to 2/3 of the forest area in Europe. So if we want to have a kind of a overview of what's happening in Europe, we better really first look at those countries that possess the richest or have the largest forest area. And the third, of course, it was a bit of also pragmatic question because we had no time to cover all 27, formerly 28 member states, and some language barriers and also some more practical questions also led us to focus on those countries. However, the case and the cases on the rural development programs, on the biomass subsidies for bioenergy, they include way more countries. They are also examples also from other countries than those that were presented. So the study comes with a kind of a rich material that can help the reader understand really what's happening not only in those 4 or 5 particular member states, but also compare this experience also with other member states so that there is a plenty of information in the report among many, if not all, member states. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thanks. I see that we're trying to resolve. I'm not sure that people can speak from the floor, so it may be necessary that you add the questions into the Q&A so that we can address them. I'll ask one more that is really on the content of the report. Has your study shown any difference between subsidies for private forest owners and state forest companies?
Yes, this is a very good question, very good one. Basically, in some of those public schemes, there are possibilities to subsidize also public forest managers, mainly represented by public forest companies. And in terms of if we do see some sort of variation in the performance of the funds and their impacts between private and public, it's hard. There are 2 case studies, the Czech case study and also the French case study, where we do see some sort of differences, yes, between the private and the public forest owners in terms of probably the design principle for the subsidies, but also in terms of the performance of the impact of the used subsidies. But I would say that the study did not look that much into these details, these potential differences or probably similarities among ownership types. I would see that as a very interesting, important question for further study. Thank you.
Great, and we will take one more before we shift over to Stefan's presentation. Some of the others may need to be answered in the chat, and as I mentioned, we'll come back to some of these in the larger discussion at the end. So the final question to Metodi is, do the bioenergy subsidies go to bioenergy producers or to land managers?
Yes, thank you. Excellent question. I love this question. Thank you so much for this one. Also for the first two. It's the former. Most of the national biomass subsidies go really to the energy producers, to the large or medium-scale bioenergy plants. Some of them even go to coal-firing plants, which want to shift from coals to bioenergy. Many go also to the end consumers, meaning households, for pellets, for different purposes, but also some go, of course, also to households if they use firewood. But in our study, we didn't find any substantial national subsidies for forest owners themselves, for the managers that produce those. So in a sense, it's a story of a subsidized, heavily subsidized bioenergy market that actually pulls and provides so much demand for bioenergy in Europe, so that basically I would see here sort of a market distortion because of those environmentally harmful subsidies. And unfortunately, there are no biomass, there are no specific subsidies for forest owners and managers in this regard, at least nothing that we found out. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm watching the questions pour in, but we will continue to answer them as we go along. And I would like to move now to Stefan Kreft, who will talk a little bit about the German program mentioned within the report. Stefan, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. And thanks a lot to Fern for having us as Naturwald Akademie, Naturwald Akademie. Next slide, please. Okay, so the funding schemes I would like to explain a little bit into detail to you are comprised by the so-called Federal Action Plan on Nature-Based Solutions for Climate and Biodiversity in Germany. And it's ANK for its German title. Next slide, please. Yes, thank you. So the aim of the plan is to strengthen the resilience of ecosystems in Germany and their climate mitigation performance. For this, 3.5 billion euros are reserved over the period of 5 years, starting last year. And the plan consists of 10 fields of action, and one of those is forest ecosystems. And it's important to understand that this action plan was created by the former government, and I will get back to that later on. Next slide. There are 2 funding schemes relevant for this webinar, and for the sake of simplicity, I will call them BASIC, which is the so-called Climate Adaptive Forest Management funding scheme, and Ambitious, the Climate Adaptive Forest Management Plus. They have in common that they are for private and corporate forests, so include communal forests. And the original plans by the former government were to spend 200 million euros annually over 5 years into each of the 2 schemes. The BASIC scheme has already started 2 years ago, and the Ambitious one was supposed to start last year in summer. Next slide. Okay, a little bit about how the 2 schemes relate to each other. and how they work. So the basic scheme is a package of 12 conditionality criteria. And if a forest owner meet those criteria, then owners get up to 100 euros per hectare and year, and this runs for 10 years. Then there is here on the bottom part of the slide, the ambitious program, and this consists of 2 modules, and it's important to understand that fact. There's module A, which works a little bit like the basic scheme. It's also a package, runs for 10 years, but the thresholds, ecological or forest management criteria are more, I would say, ambitious, difficult to meet. But if you do, then you get up to 240 euros per hectare and year. And very different from module A is module B, because it's only 2 criteria and both are optional. So first optional criterion is the full protection of mature broadleaf forest, old stands. And the second is if you leave 50% of the deadwood on a calamity area, then you can get a lot of money. It can rise even above 1,000 euros per hectare and year. And this is calculated individually according to the stand characteristics. Next slide. Okay, now lots of colors, but no panic. I will explain to you. So here on the left side, left column, you have benchmark criteria, which we as consultants, having been commissioned by the Federal Ministry for Environment in Germany to prepare the funding scheme scientifically and also practically. Those benchmark criteria we used, and we drew them from the Lübeck concept. Lübeck, I'm sitting here now in the city of Lübeck in northern Germany, has a municipal forest, and the forest management scheme here applied has been acknowledged by the EU Commission as a truly environmentally sound forest management standard. So there are criteria that refer to structural characteristics such as living biomass, dead biomass, closed canopies, and so on. And then there are the criteria that refer to management practices such as skidding trails, or the land sparing non-intervention areas, things like that. And then looking at at how the basic scheme is designed, you see lots of yellow and red, and meaning that the criteria and that program fall far behind what we consider to be necessary to develop a forest that will be healthy in the future. And then next slide, please. We have the ambitious program, and you see a lot more green, meaning that yes, this one is more promising than the basic one, but still there are some issues there as well, so not really up to the challenge either. Okay, yeah. What are the achievements and the issues? The basic program, well, one should appreciate that it's the first payment scheme ever established on the national level in Germany for forest ecosystem services. This is an achievement. And by the end of 23, well, now actually it's still the same, 17,000 participants are there, and they are bringing in 1.5 million hectares of forest, and this equals more than 1/5 of private and corporate forests. The budget is 145 million euros per year for, now the issue, something that is really low threshold. So the scheme probably won't be very effective ecologically speaking. Next slide. By contrast, the more ambitious program, which was published finally end of 24, yeah, there's more ambition, and it has survived the change of governments. That's also, of course, an achievement. But there are also issues. There is no budget yet, so you can't apply for it yet. Negotiations are going on right now in the Bundestag, the Federal Parliament of Germany. And if any, the budget will probably only be 20 million euros per year, which is only 10% of what was originally planned by the former government. There's the risk that the program will be watered down and also that it might not materialize at all. Last slide, please. Okay, so there has been a public debate. It's important in a democracy. The forestry and timber lobby and allied parties opposed because of a league bureaucracy overload, and also they didn't like the land sparing of 5%. But now forestry lobby organizations are happy. On the other hand, there is the ambitious program, more or less same game, similar arguments, but now also the fear that the money might be taken away from the first program. So that some forestry lobby organizations are still trying to undermine the start of the program. And with this, I'm ready for questions, or I think we will listen to Anne's presentation first before having questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Yes, we will move directly over to Anne's presentation, and I already see some questions directed back to you, which we will address after Anne's presentation. Anne, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So just first, who we are, because I'm Anne Crespin, working for Fern Nature, but what is Fern Nature? It's a technical team that is working for the benefits of forest ecosystems. But what are we doing? Next slide, please. So we are doing professional training. We are a non-profit organization, and we promote resilient management of forest ecosystems, mainly through close to nature forestry. So we organize professional training for foresters, training them in resilient forest management. We communicate, so we have specialized magazine. We are disseminating science results on forest management. We have newsletter. We organize conferences, webinars. Then edition, so we edit some books, some technical brochures for foresters, and we have some web tools always to help foresters in the field. And then we are also managing projects. We will discuss this later. So next slide, please. So what are our assets? And this is important because we could find fundings to develop our activities that we have now the assets. Okay, 40 years experience, but a multidisciplinary team with technical expertise that is recognized all over Europe. And this is really because we have a team that we could maintain during several years and that could acquire this technical expertise. So we have also experience in EU projects, and we have partnerships all over Europe. So today we're speaking about forest restoration. So how to restore forest while maintaining timber production. This is the question of Fern Nature. So we are dealing with restoring forest, and we think that a good solution is close to nature forestry according to Pro Silva principle. I won't go too much into details to explain what is this forestry approach, but it's in line with the nature restoration regulation that is, and with the indicators to restore forest ecosystem. It's also a forestry approach that is economically viable. So it's not a forestry approach that needs subsidies instead. So It's very good to know that that we know what we want to do, so close to nature forestry. But what is needed for this? We need practitioners to have the knowledge and the skills to implement the restoration measures. And for us, it is key because we know what we have to do, but at the end of the day, who is doing this? The practitioners. So we have to demonstrate them how the implementation of close to nature forestry. We need to inform them on the benefits of restoration measures, and we need to train them how to do this. So know how to finance this, how to finance this training. So in Forêt Nature, we have a strategy based on project and public procurement in Wallonia and in Europe. And then we have a first change that we launched some years ago. I will explain you in a bit. So the projects in Wallonia, I will not go too much into details. You can go to next slide, maybe. I will not go too much into details neither, but so these projects are always projects that are trying to disseminate information about resilient forest management, to develop training of foresters. The 5 years plan for forest research and outreach, it's collaboration with the universities in Belgium and research centers, and we are the partner for disseminating all science results. And then we have a big convention with the Walloon region on close to nature forestry to train foresters in Wallonia on close to nature forestry. And we had several people in the team that were working only to train foresters in Wallonia to do this. And then the other projects were like little projects. Then we have EU projects also. So this is 6 years ago, we realized, we knew already that we could not rely only on Walloon public procurement to develop our activity. So we started to work at international level and to develop some projects to also try to share our expertise in Europe. So we started developing EU projects, and here are some examples of projects that we coordinated. So ASCA4, which is promotion of close to nature forestry through training and communication. Forest Mooked for Change, an online training tool on close to nature forestry. The next session is in 2 weeks. You can subscribe if you want. So ISC4 and ISC4Clim, this is to train our team. So our team is traveling all over Europe to improve their expertise, and then Training for Change. So this was an intensive training for forestry students and young foresters. So you see always EU projects that were funded to train foresters or future foresters. So now we know also that it's not always easy to get some projects. So some years ago, we launched the Forest Change. So Forest Change, you can go to, yeah, thank you. Forest Change is a fund, and we ask citizens and enterprises for some money to continue our activities and to also to help us co-finance EU projects, because as you know, usually EU projects are not 100% financed, and we always need to find the co-financing. So now, what is our situation? It's good you saw what we are developing, what we developed, but today, the Close to Nature Convention with the Walloon region is stopped because of budget issues in Wallonia. We have new EU projects that are under development, but only one little project ongoing. And then we have Forest Change, and we are finding some funds, but for the moment, it's not really important. So here you see the challenge to keep the expertise of our technical team without fundings and to continue our activities. And we want to keep our technical team that has so much expertise now. And as you saw in Metodi's presentation, we have low external durability and budget. And here we are working hard to find some solutions to continue our activities. So I will finish this presentation just repeating this, that practitioners are the key for implementation restoration measures, because they are the ones who are doing this. So we should put a lot of efforts in training them and helping them in their work, because they need to be helped in their work, because and for this actually we need permanent funding for training practitioners. As I said, it's really fundamental, as the skills and knowledge of practitioners are the cornerstone of forest restoration. So when you speak with foresters doing close to nature forestry, they usually say that they don't need subsidies, but they always want to be trained and to use their science results to improve their practices. So I think it's really like the best option for us and for forest restoration. And this was my last words. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you so much, Anne. A powerful message to keep foresters in the forest, which I think many of us online today can agree to. So I will now immediately pass to some of the specific conversation clarification questions. I have a few that have been flagged. The first one from Ian Hanna: the German scheme looks very innovative in terms of its duration and its criteria. How rigorous is the auditing system? Are there sufficient skilled ecologists to make assessments for compliance versus the criteria? While the basic criteria may be considered insufficient for best outcomes, is there scope for the criteria to evolve over the duration of the program? Stefan, would you like to respond?
Okay, so many sub-questions. I will try. So first of all, auditing is organized in that way that the two of the main certifiers, FSC Germany and PEFC, are in charge to send auditors. Do you say so in English? I think into the forest, but the rest is intransparent. So the quality of auditing is a black box, which I think casts certain doubt on effectiveness, even when threshold criteria, like in the ambitious German funding scheme, are relatively high. So this is a difficult one. And this probably also answers kind of many of the questions that came with your main question. But let me see. Where do I find it here?
I think I moved it also into answered.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe if that's a good answer, disappointing as it probably seems, then okay. But if you have further questions, please get back to me.
Great. Thank you very much. So I have a question to both of you, actually. So one program is based on management criteria, and another program is based on advisory services to achieve the outcomes that we want to achieve. Maybe just to put those two case studies into dialogue, what are some of the advantages and disadvantages of having a program that is based on criteria and versus a program that is based on actually putting the people with the expertise out into the field? So maybe we can start with Anne and then move back to Stefan.
I'm sorry, but I didn't understand the question, maybe, or I don't know how to answer it. So maybe
so your program is based much more on putting the experts out in the field to do the work. So it's just speaking a bit to how is that approach advantageous compared to a system that has criteria that a forest manager needs to fulfill?
I think both can be, but both can. I don't think that we should think that one is important and the other is not important. For us, it's just, of course, there could be some criteria to follow and so on. But at the end of the day, who is doing it? The practitioner. And I think that everyone here in the panelists agrees that practitioners have to be trained. And when they are able to do something, then they can fulfill the criteria. But they have to be able to do it. So, yeah.
Very helpful. Yeah, Stefan?
Yeah, completely agree with Anne. I think you need both. You need both kinds of resources, the money and also the knowledge. And in terms of the two funding schemes in Germany, the basic program, actually the applicants were left alone. So they kind of out of magic should know how to do it. We're supposed to know how to do it. And in the ambitious program, the lesson was learned. And we were asked to elaborate like a manual for like how to do it, how to, do a better, more ecological forest management, but in a written form. And I think you can't replace the dialogue, the direct dialogue to go into the forest with the practitioners, what Forêt Nature is doing.
Yeah, very helpful. Yes, it definitely wasn't meant to say one is better than the other, but I think what's helpful out of what we've just heard is regardless of what criteria is out there, you need people who know what to do in the forest for the program to be effective. And I think that's a powerful conclusion that we see. I'll try and answer, or I'll try and put forward just one or two other questions before we move to the poll. So let's see, from Norman Zushevich. I am so sorry if I butchered your name. The idea is very nice and the program is tempting. I'm not sure which one this is directed to, but money for supporting such management methods has to come from somewhere. My question is, where is the money coming from? Is it funded by the taxpayers? I think this can be applicable to both schemes. So maybe in this time, we'll start with Stefan and then move to Anne.
Yes, simple answer. Yes, it's taxpayers' money. So redirecting from the big pool of taxes into something that is designed to serve the whole society, which is ecological forest management. So ecosystem services are for everybody. So that's the idea.
Thank you. Anne?
Yes, okay. Coming from the taxpayers, sometimes we have foresters who pay for their trainings, but imagine education is almost all the time from taxpayers because it's education. It's difficult for me to say that, but yeah, how to train public foresters in another manner, in another way than paying taxes. So if you have solutions, I'm open.
Yes, and I think also that we'll see that many of the programs are relying on public finance, whether they are harmful, positive, or mixed. That was a large element of the study is I think we often hear that there are not subsidies for forest use. And this was part of the interest that we had for looking into this discussion more widely to see that there is a lot of public funding that is out there that can be redistributed while also knowing that there are private funds that could be available as well, which I think Anne also touched on in terms of trying to raise private money for the same purpose. So I think with that, there are still many questions in the chat, but I would like some time to be able to answer our polling questions. I think some of the conversation that we've had just now may give you some ideas of what you might prioritize in terms of forest funding that should be pursued in the next years. So what I would ask is for you to please look at your screen, go down to the polls if you don't see anything in front of you. Go down to more and then polls and quizzes, and you should see a question 1 in front of you. It is a prioritization question. So based on what you've heard, please list in the order of priority from 1 to 4 where forestry finance could be channeled for the best environmental outcomes. So you should be able to prioritize from 1 to 4. I see that 3 people have already jumped into the game. And we will wait to get a good amount of numbers. We're seeing currently a lot for transition finance, from intensive to less intensive forestry production. We have some on conservation programs. I'm glad to know that the polling function is working. I'd like to get us past 40 responses if we can. And then maybe while we wait for the last responses to come through, I do see another question in the chat for Anne directly from Amila Meskin. Do your activities also target planners responsible for forest management plans? In addition, how do you see the alignment of forestry education systems in Belgium and, if relevant, in other countries with Forêt Nature principles, close to nature forestry, or Pro Silva approaches?
So for the first question, yes, we also target planners. Of course, it's not our main target audience, but all planners in Wallonia were trained by us. And then, alignment with forestry education systems in Belgium. We offer every year, anyway, some days in the field to the universities. So all forestry students come at least once or twice in the field with us for trainings. And it's also, so our principles are close to nature forestry. It's also, our principles answer what science is saying for resilient forest management. So actually the programs, the training education programs in a lot of countries are more and more in line with what we are doing. So this is important. And of course, we have partnerships and all our partners have partnerships with universities and high schools and forestry schools in their countries. So we really work together. We're just doing continuous training and they are doing initial education, or mostly.
Great. Thanks for that response. I think we can go ahead and close the poll. I see that there's been a slowdown in terms of inputting. Great. So I think that we see the transition finance from intensive management to less intensive management has come as a strong priority 1. Then we have conservation programs like the Metso program in Finland is also a high-ranking priority, coming in 2nd. Then advisory services to forest owners. I guess there's also some overlap with 2 and 4. And then we have research and development, for example, a dedicated Horizon Fund on biodiversity-friendly management as the last priority coming in. Of course, all of them are important, but it's interesting to see what the audience finds as their own personal priorities. Do all of the speakers have any reflections on what they see in terms of the first poll? Maybe Metodi, we'll bring you back in.
Yes, thank you, Kelsey. Thank you so much for all participants for these very interesting results. They basically more or less support some of our basic conclusions and our key conclusions for this study and recommendations of our study. So really, thank you so much. It looks like, the study will receive a lot of support in this regard. Thank you.
Stefan, any reactions?
Of course, it's would be good to have all of this with enough funding, because the crisis is serious and the challenge is there. Yeah, I understand. I think the the common sense here, with the priority on money for transition. But I would like to emphasize, as I said before, that it's super important as well to take forest practitioners by the hand and talk to them and show them how to do things. We also do that as Naturwald Akademie. So yeah.
Yes, that's also something that I took from the exchange. I mean, whether we're talking about any of these four, there needs to be training associated to know what to do, whether it's a management for conservation, management for timber production, an advisory service needs someone who can advise, and the research and development needs experts as well. So point well taken. And any additional reflections on the poll?
Yeah, so first, thank you to Fern for organizing this webinar. And yeah, I think, and we saw this during this webinar, actually, we all have to work together because the challenge of forests now are so big. So in fact, we are never saying that some financing are not good if they are going in the good way. So in fact, several systems can go together.
Perfect. So I think what we will do now is we will close down this first question and we will open up the second question that we have, which is now on the opposite side of how to address harmful or maybe mixed subsidies and better use that funding that is already being distributed for better purposes. So you should see that question up on your screen. I will read it out. What would be the most impactful in terms of subsidy reform in your country or region of work? Here you only have a single choice. I recognize that perhaps you would like to click all three, but depending on your context, you may see a specific priority come forward, and so we encourage you to pick that one. Once again, we'd also like to get up to around 40 before we close the poll. And while that's going on, I will go through a few of the remaining questions that are out there. So this one from Tom Chambers: does the ANK program collate examples of successful case studies and share information on that? Stefan.
Yeah, the two funding schemes, climate change, adaptive forest management, and plus, they are just naked directives with no any further help given to applicants of, and this also means that there are no descriptions of best practice examples or anything. So this would be something that the civil society would have to complement. And this is also something that we are trying to do as Naturwald Akademie, as in a network of forest enterprises that are trying to meet the benchmark of Lübeck concept that I mentioned, and we also try to tell the story to the public. But from part of the state, no further justification using best case examples are given.
So a request to groups who see specific examples to also make some case studies. I follow up with something closely related. Another question from Ian, is the manual for the ambitious program available in English, and can it be downloaded for broader use?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for all these questions. They're all really interesting. Yeah, the manuals haven't been published yet because you can't apply for the ambitious program yet. It's as I said, it's on a razor's edge right now. We don't know whether it will materialize, and this will be decided in the next weeks until end of November. And in a positive case, if at least some small money, relatively small money, that would be 20 million euros, are dedicated to the new program, the Climate Change Adaptive Forest Management Plus, then also the manuals will be published on a website, and we can keep contact, and I will be happy to inform you about that. I am afraid they will be only in German, but I mean, with the help of modern online tools, you can read them also in other languages.
Yes, DeepL. It's a very useful tool now for all of the information in many languages. So I still encourage a few more people to try and answer the questions by finding the poll function. Metodi, I think you raised your hand. Would you like to come in as well?
Yes, just to complement Stefan's overview, in our study report, there is at least a short summary of the German subsidy schemes in English, right? Most of the indicators, the criteria are translated into English, and the basic structure, how it functions, is explained there in the study too. So probably this is at least small help for those that are interested to study how the German public scheme works or is designed to work. And I agree with Stefan, we have to wait to see whether the current political environment will support its further implementation. Thank you.
Apologies. Yes, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Lots of good information and detail to be found in the report. So yes, I think we can close the poll. It's slowed down in terms of the responses. It seems that based on who we have on the call today, reforming national subsidy programs by eliminating support for intensive forest management seems to come out ahead. Followed by eliminating national, local, or regional biomass subsidies, and finally reforming forestry interventions in the CAP national and regional plans. So very interesting to see that divide. Once again, I would go across our panelists and see if they have any reflections on these areas that are highlighted. Metodi, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Kelsey. Well, as presented, I would just once again probably summarize that according to our study, the biggest share of environmentally harmful subsidies for forestry are to be found in national biomass subsidy programs. So we probably better think how we can probably reach out to those that are responsible of designing those national programs for biomass subsidies, and try to convince them to refrain from incentivizing very, very highly intensive forestry, and rather work together with them to incentivize truly sustainable forest management practices, which, among others, will really help forest owners, forest managers keep their business and adapt their businesses to the new realities with biodiversity crisis, climate crisis, and a lot of timber demands, I would say timber supply crisis. Thank you.
Yes, very helpful to recontextualize some of the responses that we see with where we actually see a lot of the harmful subsidies dedicated. Let's go maybe to Anne next.
Well, as I said, usually close to nature foresters say that they don't need subsidies. So I would stop a lot of these subsidies just to give subsidies for training.
Thank you, Stefan.
Yeah, 100% agree with the identification of the problem, starting with Metodi's report, who made clear that that much more money is given to harmful subsidies than for those that might improve the situation. So this is a long-standing problem that seems to be really, or appears to be really difficult to tackle. But it's not impossible. I think I see but judging from German politics, that there is some movement towards like redirecting subsidies. So I think this is a super important field of action actually for civil society to point at this issue again and again and explain that it doesn't make sense to, on the one hand, pay for destruction and then on the other hand pay for restoration with less money. That's of course doesn't make any sense.
Yes, very fair point about efficient use of public funds. I think that's quite directly related to one of the remaining open comments in the chat from Tom on should us NGOs collaborate on fundraising for a positive action network, a map of continuous cover or continuous forest management. I don't know what CFM is in that example, but projects such as Freiburg and networking between them in these political times, good news demonstrations are important. If I'm to marry that with what Stefan has just said, that sounds like a very good idea to pursue. So it's a rare and good thing that we get to a majority of the Q&As that are in the chat. So I will try and get us through it in the little bit of time that's left to us. We have a question to Anne from Toby Ackroyd. Anne, do you also run training programs on the importance of strict protection, i.e. non-intervention for mitigation and resilience, as well as close to nature forestry?
So no, we totally agree that strict protection is essential as well, but we are specialized in integrated forest management. So we integrate all forest functions, social functions, environmental functions, and economy.
Oh, there are examples in the report that do talk about strict protection as well. I don't know, Metodi, if you want to just emphasize where that can be found in the report.
Yes, thank you, Kelsey, and thank you also for the question. The Finnish Metso program is a very good program example of a designed public subsidy scheme that would provide subsidies for forest set-asides, etc. Further examples can be found also in the current and also the previous rural development program funds. They are specific measures that basically allow for national countries and regions to opt and provide subsidies for commitments, environmental commitments or biodiversity commitments going beyond legal requirements or supporting, for example, already existing requirements like Natura 2000 protected areas, conservation management, and all that. But this second example very much depends on the national choices. So it's really dependent on which country decides how to use rural development funds. But basically, it's possible to use also rural development funds for providing subsidies, compensation for strictly protected areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I see that Stefan is answering one question, and then we have one from Jiran Hamming. Hi, I was wondering, do you know of any schemes that are effective in increasing forest area in a region or country? So I think maybe everyone can answer. I see Stefan's hand up first, so go ahead.
Yeah, again, another important question. In the coalition contract of the former government, there was the plan to also start a funding scheme on increasing forested land, but that was tabled. So it didn't materialize because of money issues, and also because the former government kind of eroded collaboration between the parties in the coalition, started to erode after a midterm. Plan is there, and but it also turned out, we also participated in that project, turned out that it wouldn't be easy to achieve. Only if with lots of money you could see some progress.
Metodi, please.
Yes, thank you. A very relevant example of public subsidies that will help increase the forest area through afforestation practices, right? I mean, planting trees on land that hasn't been a forest area before. This can be all found in the two examples of the EU Common Agricultural / Rural Development Policy funds. So I would say that it's probably there where probably the member states receive and use a lot of EU funds complemented by national subsidies to support the increase of forest area. However, it's really important, and this is also bits described in the report, it's really important to always assess the environmental impacts of afforestation projects, because there is a strong movement. There's also evidence that planting trees on open areas is not always the right thing to do from a biodiversity and climate protection perspective. And this is very hard to be understood by professional foresters or forest practitioners, because they believe that planting trees is always the best thing to do. However, the problem is that some landscapes need open areas. Some habitats really crucially depend on open areas. Even there is a need to even cut down some natural succession forests that regenerate spontaneously, in order really to keep some habitat types and key species under the Natura 2000, for example, program, etc. So the recommendation is, yes, use agricultural funds for new forest areas, but please always consider the environmental impacts of these projects and then find the right balance between them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last comment, Anne, before we move to closing?
No, thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you
So,
for
yes, of course. So just a few words of closing. Some of the things that I've taken from the exchange that we've had today is that there are a lot of funds that are floating around currently, and countries have some important decisions to make on wise finance use and how to use their budgets effectively. I think we've seen today that there are many ways that you can make finance work, whether you're looking from laying out criteria and having those fulfilled and rewarded financially, or looking to create programs where finance can go directly to advisors, for example. But I think one of the biggest messages that we take from the exchange today is that we need to support the forest owners and workers that know how to do the job to achieve increased outcomes for biodiversity, whether we're talking about timber production or whether we're talking about conservation of old growth forests. So despite the fact that we are in tricky political situations now as concerns some of these programs, we do see that there are ways to move forward, and people that are doing good work to set up programs that do help foresters achieve better outcomes on their lands. So I want to give a very heartfelt thank you to the 3 panelists that we've had today. You've really shared some amazing information, and thank you to everyone who's stayed online all the way until the end. So I look forward to continuing the discussion with everyone, and thank you and have a good afternoon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.